Hello friends, sailors and future sailors. It's Monday the 22nd of August 2022, and when I try to recite the date on camera, even though I just looked at it a little bit ago, I understand why Irvin gets that look in his eyes when trying to remember what it is. There's two things I wanted to talk about today. One's the stem piece that I made a little bit ago, and the second one is the vent trunk on the afterface of bulkhead number 2. And so this is my stem, the first thing. It's drawn out on the Paradox plans in drawing number 7, and so in the corner of drawing number 7, this is a small copy. There's station marks 100 millimeters apart. It also marks basically the half widths from a center line for the widths of this at the surface, at the face, as well as it gives you this curve here as a height from each of those 100 millimeter station marks up from this interface. And so I only remember part of how I did this, unfortunately. It's funny, you think that you would remember it, spend a lot of time doing it, but I can share the parts that I do remember. I looked a decent bit at building as a Johanna, the blog there, which has been an excellent resource, thank you, and learned a lot from there, including one mistake that they were kind enough to share. Thank you for sharing your mistakes, about the half widths at the top. And so what I ended up doing here was making little templates. These are approximation of the each station, and go kind of like this. And so I marked them just with letters, and on the version of the plans that I had printed and was using, I just labeled them the same. And so basically I marked the controlling dimension. I believe in all cases that was at the top. And it's a half width, so that's the width on both sides of the vertical center, perpendicular dropping down. And then basically just took a protractor or an angle keeper and measured out the 29-degree bevel that's called for in the plans, to get the other angles, the whole triangle here, marked at every 38 millimeters. That's the thickness of each of one of these kind of laminations here. I believe it's 38 millimeters. And so I got a thickness there that I could use, and kind of mark out the shape here. If I recall what I did, and I'm not completely sure, I think I actually marked the stations out at the bottom of the top lamination and the top of that middle lamination. So I ended up actually measuring everything, I believe, basically at that interface without the top on it yet. And so I laminated, I think, the bottom two pieces together and used the intermediate markings there at the second piece to actually cut this out at first. And then I think I put the top piece on it and then cut that to be in line, or possibly sanded it to be in line with the others. I actually don't remember. Ended up using some ring nails to bring it together, being wary of the fact that I will want to drill through this, I believe, to put some type of hook or eye through it, so that you can pull the boat up onto a trailer or move it around, connect a line to it, and the like. This curve was done, I think, by sawing vertically down with a saw, and then I kind of either chipped it out, and then I think it was just sanding down to that. But yeah, it is really funny to me how much time went into making this about a month ago, and I've forgotten a lot of how I made it, so I'll try to make these videos a little bit more frequent. One of the things I've heard is that it's great to get the dimensions here as good as you can, but don't sweat it too much, because ultimately when the bow comes together at the front, there's actually, in many people's cases, it sounds like a lot of reshaping that ends up happening. A lot of making up some thickened epoxy to kind of fill some void areas and some sanding to make it actually fit the specifics of your boat. Don't know about that yet, but we'll see. So that's yet to come. The other one, which is bloody challenging for me and an epoxy nightmare, is the vent trunk on the afterface of Bulkhead number 2. Looks very nice and finished paradoxes, but it's fun to make. So there's a lot of just kind of latent trigonometry you're working through to get angles and sizes. Some extra plywood needed to make the parts of it. There's also some blocking underneath it that I just made up of 2x4 scraps down here. The filler piece that goes in the center here is again mostly 2x4, 1x4 scraps that are epoxied together with a thickened epoxy. The 2x4 and 1x4 scraps I have kind of the radius to rounded corners slightly, so definitely getting the thickened epoxy in there to make sure there aren't voids in there. The kind of purpose of this piece here, this kind of filler piece in there, this is bloody strong with all the epoxy. It's also an absolute nightmare looks-wise. Epoxying this was very difficult and it looks atrocious, but it's amazing what sanding does. So I'll just go ahead and show you the absolute mess of epoxy that I have. Slowly I'm getting better at it over time, not starting with a mess of epoxy, but there's some work to get there. But this little bit here acts as both the mast step, where the mast will be resting as it comes through here. But this whole area adds, you get airflow through here. There's a big circle I'll cut here. I actually was looking at making that a like a 6-inch hatch. I think that's a 4.5-inch cutout. I'm going to look at the plans again to confirm that, just because it gives me the potential to put a hatch in there and screw it together and get a nice closed setup if I need to there. But also I believe this is where your I think below that is where you run the lines to control the rig. There's a little some cam cleats that I believe go down here eventually. One thing I've heard from people is the angle on the plans for the cam cleats is a lot lower than what they liked in practice. A lot of them wanted the cam cleats to be almost horizontal, so it's just a quick tug down or tug up to set or unset those. So I'm planning to start off, when I do get to that point, with a much more vertical cam cleat. But getting back to this, the purposes of this little shelf in here are both for the mast, but also for drainage. And I believe the intent is to provide a fairly, not necessarily watertight, but dry fitting that's area that's draining, even potentially in a capsize. And there will be a baffle that goes in here to help with that as well. It's pretty sturdy after just putting 2 sides on. This is a 3/4 inch plywood here, and this is just a 1/4 inch on the side. What I'm looking to do probably is, a lot of people talk about leaving this side off until later. What I think I might actually do here is I'm considering making a piece that is just a light frame around here. So I kind of tie these pieces together, but with a large void in there, which I'll use this additional piece, like kind of a large plywood cover that can be screwed down into that, maybe with some like, I don't know, T-nuts or some of the nuts that I can either epoxy or put in there, not quite PEM nuts, but something threaded that I can take this panel off to access and work in here, and then just put a cover over it for a lot easier access. A lot of sanding needed, obviously that large part needing to be cut out of there. This is actually the second block I cut to go in here. The first one just wasn't quite right and got very wet. I made the mistake of leaving it out in the rain, and fooled me twice. I ended up rescuing this from starting rain and making sure it was dried out. This is marine grade plywood, but I still prefer not to get the boat wet, at least before it's epoxy sealed. so I don't think there was really too much to worry about damage there, but did get it out and make sure that the fan was dry, blowing over it for a couple days. So there's some steps that remain. The biggest one that I think I'll work on later today is vent hole. It calls for 1-inch PVC pipe, I believe, in the plans for this. And if that's specified according to how I normally understand it, in the United States, a Schedule 40 1-inch PVC pipe is the inner diameter, the ID of the pipe. And so the OD is something like 1.3 and change inches on that, which is bigger than any of the auger bits or long spade bits I have. I've heard reports of other people who have just used 1-inch OD pipe on there, and I have some of that from another boat project that I can just take a look at and see if that'll fit, and then get a long enough length here. But the reports I've heard from people who've used 1-inch OD pipe there is that it worked perfectly fine. They didn't have problems with drain, the speed of draining or anything there. And I think that's probably something I'm more likely to be able to get through here easily. But I'll take a look at that a bit more. I'll have to look at the plans in detail and see if it's clear if Matt was specifying the OD for the pipe roughly, or if he was actually intending it to be larger, how important that is. But yeah, tempted to go with the 1-inch roughly OD pipe. I need to look into the details there, and I'll let you know what I do. But I think the pipe going through here at an angle will be the next step after I do some sanding to clean this all up. So the pipe there, there's a little bit more, couple pieces to go in here for setting where the mast step is. I'm not sure if I'm going to put those in just yet, or if I'm going to wait until this is closed up a little bit more. The other main thing will be blocking up the top piece here. That I have to figure out how I want to do that. Just because there's the whole curve of the hull here to match against, and there's a couple pieces to cut through there. Then I think most people wait to do that, but I have more reading to do on that. So this is where things stand with this one. It's much stronger now that it's come together. There's a lot of work left to do, just cleaning up this epoxy mess and trimming down the kind of foot down here. So yeah, the next things I see are probably getting started. A little more research into the pipe there, drilling for the pipe, and then epoxying that in place, as well as cutting out this side so that it's a kind of a loose open frame, assembling that there, and then probably moving on to the transom baffle cleat. Been looking at that a little bit. At first I thought the whole thing would be a wide piece of material with just an arc cut into it, and now with some of the pictures I've seen, it's really just more like a thin piece of material with the correct bevel cut into it that is basically contorted into the curve that takes it this transom there. A lot of mileage I'm getting out of pictures that other people have taken. Really appreciate that, and as painful as it is sometimes to take work pictures in progress or videos in progress, I think I'll try to share as much as I can, just to give other people that are working on this an idea of at least what I tried. Might not be the best, but at least it's some insight. Trying to think what else has been going on. Ended up having to get 1 more gallon tub of Cabasil, or the fumed silica. I ran through the first one, making thickened epoxy. I got my scale back in commission. I have the mustard pumps for my epoxy and hardener, but the problem I've been running into is even the smallest batches that I could make with those sometimes were too much, and I'd been running through epoxy far too fast, and that stuff's expensive. So moving back a bit to just using the scale for mixing there. One challenge I've come across, I tried using the flexible silicone epoxy mixing cups that I found online. They're supposedly really easy to clean. You can just turn them inside out. But they're not really easy to clean. I got enough that I could potentially do a whole day's worth of epoxy in them. They're not too expensive. And then turn them out before the next session. But you really just get like a static, clingy lot of like epoxy threads, and I've tried using a brush, different stiffnesses to clean those out. They just really haven't been working. And so I'm looking to move back towards just paper cups for mixing, cheap paper cups. I saw somewhere, I think it was Duckworks website, they sell some, and I'd used some of theirs, I believe, when I got started, and they worked just fine. I tried to find a bulk supplier for those that was unwaxed, yet sure enough, when I got the cups, they're waxed. And I've seen some concern voiced that you don't want to contaminate your epoxy with those materials. You want truly just paper cups, but those seem a little bit hard to get a hold of. So I need to look more there, or maybe just go back to Duckworks and just get my cups from there. I'll be up in Port Townsend for the Wooden Boat Festival this September. In 2 weeks, so I might be able to. I'll be up there a little early during the week, so I might be able to just pick stuff up from their, order it for will call, and do that there. But I'll probably need something in the interim, so we'll see what I end up mixing stuff in. Aside from that, I think that's all I have for today. Plenty of sanding, ordering more abrasives as I go through those. You can clean them out a little bit with a brush or the like, but I'm discovering, just especially with epoxy, how effective changing a belt or a pad can be for just keeping you moving through material pretty well. That's all for now. Take care. It's just a quick follow-up looking at that pipe diameter. As I understand it, a 1-inch Schedule 40 pipe here in the United States has an OD of about 1.3 and small change inches. And so I've got my calipers here, and just looking at what a 1.3 OD would look like against this little block. Let's see if I can show you. That is an enormous hole. That's an enormous hole to create through this. It just obliterate this. Whereas, looking at something that's, roughly 1-inch OD, so perhaps that'd be a 1/2-inch PVC pipe, which has an OD of roughly 7/8 of an inch or thereabouts. That's the bit I've used before for it. That looks a lot more sane to go through this. But zounds, yeah, that 1.3-inch diameter, just huge to try to drill through here. So I really have a hard time picturing a pipe that large. So I'm inclined to possibly go with, the 1/2-inch ID pipe here. I think it's 22 millimeters perhaps. OD is what I've seen and heard other people using in the metric world. So if I switch over here, yeah, a 1/2-inch pipe is about 22 millimeters roughly OD. So I'm inclined to go with that approach here for now, because the other just seems far too large.